Hey, Dr. Cora, how are you?
Hi, Justin. How you doing?
I'm doing amazing. I'm doing amazing. So for those who are listening to this or joining this, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Cora Stover. I'm a naturopathic doctor. I have about 10 years experience as a naturopath, and then prior to that, I have experience in the health industry through massage therapy and gardening. So I have like a well-rounded plant-based knowledge, workings of the body and how we respond to pain and how we our body interprets different factors of the health to get our attention to lead us to a path of healthier position.
That's awesome. So 10 years ago, you got into naturopathic medicine. I'm sure there's a story there. What led you down that path and made you feel like, yes, this is my career?
Sure. So 10 years ago is when I graduated my naturopathic program. That's like when I was able to start practicing and all that. So my journey started way before that, probably I would say 20 years ago. And it started with, or even more, probably more like, I would say, yeah, like probably more like 30 years. So around the time I was about 10 or 15, my parents, my mom specifically, was very sick. She had a condition called sarcoid, which is an autoimmune condition that affects the lungs. It could affect the skin, it can affect the kidneys, and it can affect the nervous system. So depending on the degree of the sarcoid will depend on and which organ system it's affecting will kind of limit their ability to function in the world. And so my mom had um, pulmonary sarcoid, and it didn't progress to kidney or the skin or muscular. It went from, well, I guess you could say that it did affect the muscular because later she had RA, which is another autoimmune condition. But that kind of
Rheumatoid
pinpointed,
arthritis?
yeah,
Sorry.
rheumatoid, sorry, yes,
Okay.
rheumatoid arthritis, where so she had two compounding autoimmune conditions. So the sarcoid kind of spun it a little bit, and I was paying attention because my great grandfather, who was in his 80s at the time, he died of lung cancer. And so he was a smoker, and this he came from an era where children worked in factories and they got their limbs chopped off, and they told parents that smoking is good for the health, and they pushed the advertisements, and then we learned that, oh, that's not always true, and the advertisements aren't always being truthful. They're trying to sell a product. So kind of learning to follow the money and kind of think outside the box of like what is good, what is bad, um, and not like, oh, this is good, this is bad, but not in that sense, but understanding that not everyone has your best interest and we don't always have the most information, and so taking it in and applying it to the individual. Is this something that's good for this person? Is this something that's going to help them, or is it something that can harm them? And so really focusing in on the individual person and their health. For some people, we know that they can drink, smoke, gamble, and live a wild life, and nothing bothers them. They don't get sick, they live a long life, and they did all the things. And then there's the other spectrum, where the other side of it, where the same sort of scenario can play out, and they get cirrhosis of the liver, pulmonary diseases, kidney diseases, all the STIs, all of like they're just so vulnerable. So every person is different and every person needs to be treated as such. So one type of medicine isn't good for every single person in all situations. Some medicines you have to look at the person and say, is this the best fit? Is this going to support my patient, my client, and see if they're going to get better or not? So it's just working with the situation, the symptoms that they're expressing to you, the situation, their mental state, their physical state. It's all of it. Their lifestyle. Does it support them? So that's
So
how I
it,
got
it
into it.
no, it makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like instead of the cookie cutter approach to health, it's more individualized. And for anybody that is maybe doesn't know what naturopathic doctor does and how it maybe compares or contrasts to traditional Western medicine, that's more prescription oriented. Um, could you just maybe walk us through sort of some of the differences, some of the similarities?
Sure. So upon talking with medical doctors, the way that they like to just the or this you know the few that I've expressed and had conversations with, the way that they explain it back to me is that they're a systems pathology, follow the what's going on in the cell at like they're mechanistic in a sense. And I don't necessarily think that they would describe themselves as mechanistic, but that's essentially what it is. Today, we are in a paradigm where the majority of my patients, they're like, oh, I was sent to this specialist, then to this specialist, and nobody's diagnosing me. Nobody's giving me answers. So they're sent from one person to another to kind of figure out what the issue is, and nobody's kind of looking at the whole picture. So the way that I practice medicine, and every naturopath that you see a different naturopath, you'll get a different diagnosis, you'll get a different uh, treatment plan, and it's because they're looking at the system differently with a different viewpoint. And so every viewpoint is going to affect how they treat their patient. And so in some aspects, that gold standard is not applied to naturopathic medicine, where really, it's the lens that you're coming into the world with. It's all because you have biases, whether you like to admit it or not, and you also are trying to take in the person and their essence and um what their complaints are to best assist them. So your the approach is going to be different from every single naturopath, which is great in some aspects because it gives you a wide variety of things that you can do for your patients and you're not limited. But in some aspects, it can I can see where people are like, well, it's so confusing because this doctor says I have this and this one says I have that, and what is the true answer? Well, what do you think you have? Because you're the person that's living it. What resonates with you? And it's not like, oh, I can go pick my diagnosis out of a hat, but in some essence, there's this aspect where the person's what like if I said, oh, you have ADHD, you're like, well, I'm very organized and I don't think I have ADHD. Then if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't resonate, right? So you have to explore that as well.
So let's take chronic disease, for example, because it seems like across the US and the world, but definitely across like sort of the Western side of the world, um, rates of chronic disease are skyrocketing, heart disease, obesity, things like that. From where you sit, are you seeing a lot of that in your practice? And what's your take on it? Like, what do you think's driving it?
So I think that's a very multifaceted problem because I don't think that there is one answer that says, oh, this is the cause. We can't say like, oh, it's the electricity, obviously. Like there's no way you can pinpoint just one. We are not living in a bubble. We have a lot of toxins in our environment. So we have environmental toxins. We put a lot of toxins in our body. Our food processes have gone down significantly. Our soils have gone down significantly. And when I say our soils, I mean that we used to plant, and every person had their own little like field where they grew their own vegetables and their own medicines. And they knew a lot of this back in the early 1900s. Now, I wouldn't say that they were proficient and magnificent at it because there were a lot of deaths at that point. Like we had the flu epidemic. And so there's lots of points where you can look and you can say, okay, well, this is how they used to live life. And they seem to have lived healthy lives. They didn't suffer from obesity. They didn't suffer from this, but they had other things that they were suffering from. So if we were to take the knowledge that they had and start applying it to our world today, I think we would see changes in allergies, obesity, chronic disease, as far as like mental health is stuff that's going on. Um, we would see differences in autoimmunity. And if we lived, I think, more in line with nature and how the world operates in its true natural form, so it's sleeping with the circadian rhythms, being awake when the energy is high, I think that would change the pattern of our life, because we know that if you work the night shift for X amount of years, it's going to take 3 to 4 times that the time you worked in the night shift to get back to your original state of health. um, and that's because the night shift changes that whole circadian rhythm, and it makes the person prone or susceptible to things like obesity, depression, um, hormonal dysregulation, etc. So there's lots of facets when we're looking at chronic health. It's not just a one thing.
You'd mentioned the food side of it, and I think most people understand that McDonald's may not be the healthiest thing, or a Snickers bar and a Coke may not be the healthiest thing. But there's, in the conversations I've had with other practitioners, they've really focused on processed foods as being a culprit, and all the different sort of additives like, hydrogenated oils or high sugar amounts. Um, what are your thoughts on that? And, like, how do you feel that, in what ways do we get food wrong? I get not growing our own, but where do we go wrong when we think we're doing the right thing?
So let's take a look at margarine. Margarine, it was brought to us during, I think it was World War II. I could be wrong on my dates in my history, but that was like the time frame it was. We didn't have a lot of money and they were trying to feed people. And so they did a lot of government things, where they reprocessed things or made things happen to kind of feed the populations on a cheap level without having to spend a lot of money, but have the people feel like they were living a little. So they brought in margarine. Margarine, I believe, is like a few carbons away from plastic. Um, yeah.
Wow.
So if you look at the two structures, they're very similar. And we're not supposed to be eating plastic, right? So I think everyone can agree to that. And what we've learned is that if you eat margarine, it clogs the arteries. You're building your fats and your hormones, your membranes off of that margarine, because that's what you're putting into your body. And and plastic, if you can imagine, it would be irritating, right? If like it would. We know now microplastics are not good for the body. They're seeing accumulation in parts of the tissues that shouldn't be having it, creating cancers and all these other things. So if we take that process and we extrapolate it a little bit and say, hey, this is what they thought was they were doing good, but they actually, the studies are showing that it leads to these cardiovascular defects and this pathology, then we can start understanding that the food that's being processed, being man-made in a laboratory, probably isn't the best option to be eating. They just did I just read the article, it was like last week or the week before, where we are now making butter, but not dairy butter. It's like butter has the same chemical structure. You wouldn't know that it's not butter, but it's chemically made. So they do it in a lab, not from a cow. And if you think about that, it's like, okay, what are they making that butter from? Where are they extrapolating those carbon atoms from? Is it plastic? Is it petroleum? Where is it coming from? Because those are the two main sources. If we go back to history, I think this is also World War II. It might be World War One, where we told people, and I say we because it's our government, um, we told people that dandelions were bad and clover was bad, and these are weeds. And so after the war, because they took all the metal and were making it into bullets and guns for fighting, they had a surplus of this. In the end, what they did was ground everything down, and then they gave it back to the people as fertilizer, and people would sprinkle it on their lawns. And so they were like, oh, got to get those dandelions up and got to get that clover out. Two herbs that are very good for the body. Clover can be used for female hormones and metabolism and um, perimenopause and menopause symptoms. And then dandelion is great for cleaning out the liver and making sure that the liver can detoxify. So it's like these things that people used to incorporate into their salads because they were just readily there versus, these are now bad for you.
Yeah, you try to kill them and get rid of it and have a perfectly green lawn. And um,
Right. No weeds.
so, so if somebody's listening to this, I could imagine somebody feeling a little discouraged because I shudder to think as a kid of all the things, all the plastic stuff that I would throw in the microwave and eat out of. And I think there was a saying that you eat like a credit card's worth of plastic every year or something like that. Um, Lately on social media, there's been a big push on doing some kind of a natural detox. Um, is that something that you ever like prescribe as a protocol in your practice? Like, do you do it? Curious what your thoughts are on sort of natural detoxes.
So natural detoxes in general or natural detoxes for plastic?
Both?
Okay, so natural detoxes, yes. Even like if we look at a lot of religions have a lot of fasting. During the fasting process, your body is technically detoxing. And so what's the purpose of fasting? The purpose of fasting is to gain a deeper spiritual alignment with God or Allah or whomever the the almighty be. Um or the one that you want to call. Um, but it's to gain a deeper connection with them. And then it's also to purge the body um, of toxins, of impurities, and impurities could be anything. It could be like sex or um, wanting of things, desires. So it's a purging of all those things to gain that deeper experience. So, what are things that can be thought of as purging? So, you could purge sugar, alcohol, caffeine. Those are the three main things that create a detox. If you stop those things, you'll go through sugar withdrawal, you'll go through a caffeine withdrawal, you'll go through an alcohol withdrawal. If you're an alcoholic, I don't suggest you stop that. And the reasoning why is because it's the only drug that will actually kill you if you are not detoxing in a facility. So you can go into seizure and then a coma and die from withdrawal from alcohol. So that's the only one that if like you're an alcoholic who's been drinking, excessively for many years, that's the only one that you can't do alone.
Okay. Okay. So fasting, because I've heard that in that process, you might have like damaged, like mitochondria or DNA or something where it'll go through and clean that up. Um, is there any sort of a protocol for getting plastic out that you're aware of, or are we just sort of stuck with what we've got and we need to try to like drastically minimize it moving forward?
I think we have to drastically minimize it going forward for sure. Like, our waterways are like if we use public water and sewer and all that, then there's lots of plastics in that water. So if you're running the tap to get your water and you're not filtering it, then that is one way that you're introducing it to your body. The only way that I know of, and one of the best sites for environmental stuff is the Environmental Working Group. I'm sure you've heard of them. Um, yeah, like the Dirty 13, which is
Yeah.
like the foods that have pesticides, and then the Clean 12 or whatever it is, the Dirty Dozen and Clean 12. Um, and so if you go onto their site, you can look up your specific area code of water, and they'll tell you all the chemicals that are listed in it. And they also tell you like different filter systems. And the only one that they suggest to get out microplastics is reverse osmosis. So, which can be very water wasteful, but at the same time, if you're trying to minimize the damage on your body, then it might be the only way that and 5 years from now, maybe our days are our information will change. But as it stands right now, that's the only one that removes the microplastics. So if you're trying to minimize that, that's one way. making sure that you're not heating up food in a microwave is another. So microwaves are oftentimes a radiation, and then they chemically alter the food because of they're sending radio waves. So, like, for instance, if you put a cup of water in the microwave and were to heat it up, to get it to the boiling temperature, you don't see it actually boiling. It's hot, but you don't actually see the bubbles in it. So that can tell you that there's a different mechanism of stove, induction, or gas versus a microwave, and how it heats up the elements. It's completely different. It changes it. So, I mean, not to like scare people, but you do what you have to do in order to survive, and you do what you do to feed yourself. And the body, for the most part, is willing and able to detox so long as the body is given what it's needed.
Okay. Well, that's a good reminder to like use the microwave less. I didn't really think about that part of it. I know one of the big things that's come out is like cooking with like the black plastic utensils and things like that. But definitely a good call out to like severely limit use of the microwave. I'd like to pivot a little bit to gut health, because in kind of some of my like research, it seems like that's something that severely is influencing mood, immunity, etc. And can you kind of explain the connection between like gut health and hormones, immunity, all of that stuff from where you sit?
Okay, so if let me do a little physiology prior, so that then we can know where things are getting absorbed and digested. So the first part of digestion starts with thinking about food, right? You start thinking, and then you automatically sense that your mouth is watering. That's the first step. So that will produce saliva, alpha amylase, that will break down carbohydrates. And then in the stomach, we have hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid breaks down things like protein, and starts cleaving off what's called amino acids. So proteins are made up of amino acids. Those amino acids will be carried across the membrane of the small intestine, but there's a significant pH change. So at the stomach level, it's supposed to be acidic, which is a closer number to 1 or 2. Maybe it's not necessarily that pH, but that's the scale. Um, Alkaline being closer to 14 or 12, something anywhere above there. Um, and so as you go from the stomach into the small intestine, it has a dramatic shift of pH. The pH of the small intestine is around 8. The pH of the stomach is around 2 to 3. Um, and then it travels along the small intestine, and then there's parts where the liver is going to release bile into the bile duct, or into the gallbladder. Gallbladder will then release the bile down into the small intestine. And the purpose of that is to basically, it's like soap for all the fats in your body. So most meals contain some fat, some protein, some carb. The ratio of those will be different depending on the type of meal that you have, but those are the three basics. So you need the bile in order to bring in um, the fat soluble vitamins and triglycerides and cholesterol and all these other things. And then further along, you after you get out of the small intestine, you move it into the larger intestine, where you're reabsorbing water and creating a compacted stool, essentially. So a good firm stool. So in order to have a good stool, which is like a hairbrush, I like to think of it as like a hairbrush. You're like brushing out all the knots in your hair. Um, and that's the trash of in their GI tract. If you don't have good fiber, you're not taking out the trash. You're not scraping the sides of um, the bowel and making a good poop. You're not getting rid of all the waste. If you compact it, or if it sits on top of that surface cell in that colon, then what's happening? If you've ever, walked in fall in the Northeast, there's leaves on the ground in a forest. and then there's a dry layer on top. But if you like just pick up a couple of those leaves, you'll start seeing that they're really compacted and they don't smell so good, right? Maybe they smell okay to some people, but generally you get molds and like sliminess and you're like, ew. Um, so if you don't do that for your colon, you're allowing microbes to start flourishing that wouldn't have normally flourished there. And that's the whole, part of decay. And so anywhere along those lines, if the pH isn't right, if the movement isn't right, if things are moving too fast or too slow, so diarrhea, constipation, then you won't be absorbing the nutrients the way that they're intended to be absorbed. If you get a lot of cramping, that's kind of indicating that your body's trying to remove something pretty quickly. And so you could either vomit or have diarrhea. Those are the two options, depending on what stage your body's at. So if it's in the stomach, then you'll vomit. But once it gets past the stomach, you have to wait and you get all this cramping until it exits the body. And so what you eat, what you put into your body is the foundation for your hormones, for your mental well-being, because you can't form if you don't have good fats and cholesterol to form good hormones, because you need fat and cholesterol to form all your hormones, then you won't be happy. You won't have a sex drive. You won't be able to fight infection as well, because your thyroid is playing that mechanism as well. You won't be able to run from a tiger or a source of stress, or fend for yourself during a source of stress, because you won't have the adrenal hormones that are proper. Um, all your hormones they're all tightly regulated and they're all working together. So cortisol and glucose regulation. If you're too stressed, you cannot digest your food. If you don't digest your food, you're not going to be releasing things like, um, certain hormones that are going to bring in the sugar into the body. So insulin and stuff like that, because it's not the time to digest. It's the time to run. So if you're stressed while eating, you got to change that aspect and kind of bring your body back down into a more calm state so that you can absorb your food.
What is that? I mean, that all makes a ton of sense. Stress and lack of sleep. I've read that not getting enough sleep kind of has this cascade of issues from cortisol levels going up. And then I've even heard of like your blood sugar levels rising or becoming more erratic or something.
Yeah,
Um, do you see that much in your practice? Is there something people can do to maybe um, focus
mitigate it.
more on getting good sleep and avoiding those issues? Like, where do we get it wrong?
Well, if you look at the circadian rhythm, it is also an area where you release certain hormones too. So, for instance, if you were a male who was trying to boost their testosterone, the best time to do that is first thing in the morning upon waking, because that testosterone is when it's going to be highest. And most hormones, they have two phases. So they have a high point and then they rest and then they have another high point. So there's a couple areas, throughout the day where you get these little jolts of energy or jolts of um, things or crashes from things. So oftentimes for cortisol, it's first thing in the morning to get you out of bed, to get to the meal, to stabilize the sugar. And then once your blood sugar is stabilized, you can go about the other things in the day. Um, in the nighttime, which is promoted by darkness, you'll have your pineal gland producing melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone and it helps us to sleep. So if we aren't sleeping well, one thing people can do is walk in the morning first thing upon awaking. So like maybe you go have your breakfast and then you go for a quick, I don't know, 10 or 20-minute walk. And then at nighttime, you have your last meal of the day. And when it's dark or getting dark, just after dark, you go for another 10-20 minutes, and that will stimulate your pineal gland to start producing more melatonin. So light and darkness of the day are going to affect that. False light, blue light, will affect our ability to produce melatonin. It blocks our ability. So people will wear blue light glasses, they'll wear they'll put screen protectors on their computer if they're watching TV before bed. Those are all aspects where you can disrupt your sleep. So getting a sleep hygiene is important as well.
I like the tip about kind of walking in the morning, walking at night, as something that when I was better with a routine, I noticed a really big difference. Getting sunlight as it's first coming up, and then also dimming lights to kind of put my body in a mood for sleep.
Mhm.
Um, so, for anybody listening to this that are parents and they're thinking about their kids and all that their kids encounter, wanting all of the sweet things and being on their phone all the time, the way that some kids are now. Um, I'm sure that that's driving. I've read that the rate of kids being overweight, like you were saying back in the day, like not very many people were obese, and now that number just keeps growing. What can parents do? Like, what's driving this sort of disease in kids, and what can parents do? Like, what are some simple things they can do to kind of protect their children?
Well, let's think for a second about the changes that have been made since we've grown up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know that we had a lot of kids in our family, and my mom would lock us out of the house. Like, she wouldn't let us in. So it's a little bit of a trauma, but also at the same time, it's like, no, you need to be outside and you need to go play. You need to climb trees because that helps strengthen your bones and your muscles. Like, we don't necessarily think about that as doing that, but playing outside does that. It creates your curiosity. You start exploring. It's good for your mental health. It brings you connection to the earth. Like, there's lots of reasons to play outside, and even as adults, I think it's important still. Maybe we don't like play tag or whatever, but it's fun. um so if we go outside, and we're not going to be on our phones, right? That's one part. We're getting light still because it's natural light, but it's a different type of energy. It's a different type of stimulation, one that piques curiosity versus one that's fed to us. And so we're taking the the stimulation out. So like when you stop a kid from being on their phone, they immediately are like, no, and they get really upset and they have like a little meltdown. And so if you start get working into the process of like, well, it's not like we're taking it away forever, but for 10 minutes you're going to go and do this instead. And then after that 10 minutes, like they're like, okay, 10 minutes is something I can do. After the 10 minutes, they don't really pay attention because they get locked into whatever they're doing now. So it's one way to kind of redirect them and say, we're just going to take a break for a little bit and we're going to go do this other activity. And so redirecting, and I know that's like a lot on parents because parents, they and I know that they want the best for their kids and they're probably exhausted because they're working, they're doing the house stuff, they're doing this, they're doing that, their kids have a million and one activities. And so they're just driving them everywhere. But and they also need a break, right? So sometimes that break can be like, let's just like sit outside for a moment and like see what we can hear, what birds we can hear, or like what we can, find. So I think that little switch on things is going to be beneficial. If your kid's already doing 101 activities, they're not going to be on their phone all that time, right? So a little bit of phone time I don't think is the worst thing. I know that um it's not the best thing, but it allows for other things to happen as well. So I don't get angry or upset if like kids are on phone for a good amount of time. I think that it's about the balance and making sure that they're outside and making sure that they're interacting with one another. That if they get upset, they can confront one another, because that's one of the problems with the phone is that we don't know what to do when we come face to face with someone. We have a problem. So being able to work out your problems with friends and siblings, I think, is huge. And being able to be in a confrontation without it turning into um, blood and gore. So, all skills we need.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Western medicine, it seems like, tends to do a really good job of treating and managing symptoms and things like that, especially through prescription drugs. Um, I read somewhere, I think it was on your website, but that you're a big fan of doing testing to try to kind of catch things more upstream. And what what are some basic tests that you wish everybody would get or talk to their practitioner about to start to catch some of these things upstream before they have sort of that cascade effect down the road and then they're really sick?
So I think that's I think that's a hard question to answer as like, oh, I think every person should have these tests. Um, because they don't always apply to every single person. And so I think going back to that individualized person, you have to consider what their family history is, what's going on with that person right now, and what is going to give me a good idea. Um, in naturopathic medicine, we use a lot of functional medicine um, ranges, which are different from our typical lab. So, how we look at the lab in itself is going to be different. So, I teach a course called laboratory diagnosis, and one of the aspects that we have is like, okay, Quest is one particular lab group that's up in the Northeast, and so is LabCorp. So, with those two, they're going to each have different ranges based off of their mechanisms and their agents that they're using. But then they also have what's called in statistics, they're utilizing what is coming back for that region for that group of people. So they use a bell curve and then standard deviations. So from the mean, and the mean is the average. So if like the mean is like here, or say 5, and one standard deviation leads you to 10 on one side and 0 on the other, then the range will be 0 to 10. But within that range, you're going to have people who are sick, so they're already displaying symptoms, they're already having issues, but you're not paying attention to it because that's what the average is. So, for instance, um, if we just look at the diets and weight in the South, typically we have diet of, or it's like well known for shrimp and grits and this like really hearty fried chicken, greasy foods, like. And I'm not saying that that's like, oh, every southerner eats that food. What I'm saying is like they are known for this food, like this is part of their culture, it's part of their essence. Um and so if you were eating a diet of shrimp and grits and fried chicken, your weight would be dysregulated. So you'd most likely be obese, and you would probably have a lot of lipids in your body. So a lot of cholesterol. So different good cholesterols and bad cholesterols. They wouldn't be, in good ranges necessarily. And so if you took the standard deviation and you were just exploring the weight, if Southern people are generally obese, then the reason to catch certain pathologies goes down because you're like, well, everyone's obese, so it's okay. You're not more obese than the next patient, so and they're not dead yet, so it's okay. And so this is kind of like the logic that is behind the ranges. So you're not catching everything if you're just putting your medical lens on and applying the range to it. You have to be a little bit more insightful and say, okay, well, there's textbook, and then which is like perfect numbers. And then there's like reality. So how far, what is your body supporting what you're saying, or is it saying something else? So let me see. What are your salts doing? What are your lipids doing? Um, Sometimes we have a lipid called LDL, which is known as the bad cholesterol, that comes back first during inflammatory responses. So if that one is high, it's kind of like water to a fire. It's to put out the fire, it's to mobilize things and bring hormones and alert the body to certain situations that are happening. So being able to interpret the body in a story rather than hard cold data, I think will be more beneficial to the patient.
What's so like in your practice, you see patients remotely, correct?
I see patients remotely and in person.
And in person. Okay. So I'd imagine you talk with people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds. So everybody has kind of a unique story. And then you're kind of untangling that and reverse engineering and figuring out where to start. Um, I'm curious about a patient who came to you kind of at rock bottom, really struggling, that just stands out to you. And like, how did you work with them? What did they do? You don't have to name names. And like, where are they at now? I'm kind of curious to hear sort of somebody coming to you sick, what that experience is like versus managing it with 12 prescriptions that give you 18 side effects.
Sure. So I'll talk about one woman that I had seen. She came to me because of itching skin, and she had been suffering for about a year, maybe 2 years before coming to see me. So she was sent to like skin doctors, um, all the doctors. So she was passed from one person to the next. Nobody was diagnosing her. When she came to me, she was diagnosed with fatty liver disease and was told it's incurable and high lipids, and those are, you need a statin for that. For the itching, we're going to give you this thing that's going to, be put on topically and make it go away. And then we're going to give you this other thing that antibiotics, because obviously you have chronic UTIs. So these are the things that she originally came to see me for. She was like, I got this, 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 this. And we went straight to, okay, well, let's just look at your organ function and see what's happening. We did an ultrasound on the liver to see what the state of the liver was doing. And then we also did some food allergy panels, and we did some hormone testing. So with that information, and first it all just started with just basic Quest labs that any MD could run. Um, and so we started with that information. We looked at the organ function, and then we went to see, the things that she was eating that were contributing to her system. So this particular person had O blood type diet, or O blood type. And so I gave her recommendations to stay away from like certain products like wheat. And she's like, I'm Italian, I can't do that. I'm like, yes, but you also have like roots from Ireland and these other places. So we talk about our cultures too, because it's going to really impact how we're dealing with the world. And so oftentimes people in that northern European region, they don't process wheat the same way that an Italian would. Um, and the wheat that is here in our country is not the same wheat that you're getting in Europe for whatever reason. Some people that with celiac, they go to France and they're like, "Oh, I could eat bagels and French bread all day and I never had a problem, but I come here and I can't tolerate it at all." So depending on where you're at will determine like what's going on with your body and how you're going to respond. Um, but we removed things that were contributing. And then within a couple of weeks, she was like, "Oh, my itching is not every day anymore. And it's only like, 5 days a week versus 7 all day long." And slowly she started seeing the progress. So I really love this law. It's called Herring's Law. And Herring's Law says that we heal from the top down, from the inside out, from the most important to the least important. And so if you're thinking about that and you're thinking about how animals stand, this is the bottom of your hand, this is the top of your hand, and you're just literally you're putting your hands and your feet on the ground, and then the back is obviously the back, and then you're looking up, so your chin, your face becomes the front, this is the top, this is the back, this is the bottom, and you're just taking all that in, and then this is the bottom, and this would be the back side. So it's like you're just taking all that in. So it's going to go from head to the back, down the limbs, and you just start slowly seeing it recede and kind of go out of the fingers. It's really, really cool. And I'm not saying that happens for every patient, but it's like the reverse symptoms of how they showed up is so cool to watch. If that's true healing. And when they experience that, they're like, "Oh my God, it's worse right now." And it's like, well, that's how it was in the beginning. So it's okay. And they're like, oh, okay, it's okay that my body's reacting this way. And then it like the next day, they're like, I have no itching. I have none of that. Um, and then the next follow up there, you see them, they're like, oh, you ask them about itching and they're like, uh, I don't remember. I don't remember the last time I felt itching. So it's amazing to see and amazing to watch them go through the healing process. But it takes a commitment for sure. So that she couldn't have done it if she didn't listen to like don't eat wheat. When you eat wheat, you feel like junk. And of course there's points where like she's like, "Oh, I went out to dinner. I had the best spaghetti dinner and I paid for it the next day." So it's like there were components to that. Um her hormones started feeling better. Like she felt more energized. She could do more exercise when she started eating better. Um she could sleep better. And then it like all these little things were you were starting to see the triggers and how deeply the layers were going. And so it was like all this reversal and cleaning up of the inside and the outside as she like released emotional stuff. There was more and more healing. So like the traumas that we endure can't be ignored. You have to kind of like address them a little bit to kind of move through it. And it's not necessarily like relive it. You don't have to relive your past traumatic experiences, but process them. So either forgiveness or something along those lines. And just like, if you have an attacker or something like that, I don't want to say like, oh, you have to forgive your attacker. No, it's not. The forgiveness is not them. It's for yourself. Because oftentimes we feel shame and guilt for having that experience. And so going through that and like releasing that is huge.
How long, out of curiosity, I love that. How long ballpark did it take for her to really kind of make that transition into wellness?
It took her some time. So but it also didn't take her some time. So there were parts of it that were longer and stretched out, and then there were parts that were super quick. She started noticing changes within probably 3 months herself. And then and that was because she was like, yeah, I don't really believe this. I want to try it, but I'm not really sure. So there's like some going back and forth and working with her regarding what to do and why to do it. But once she started like seeing the results, she was more gung ho about it. And she was like, oh, I need to do this. I need to do that. And more would come in and more would go out. And she started really experiencing change. Um, the last part that we left off of was her weight. She really wanted her weight to change, but she hadn't quite finished the healing from the previous stuff. So it was like, I was like, I'd love to address that with you, but it's like still not quite the time. Um, and it's because the way that her body was reacting, she would still get flare ups and stuff like that. So it wasn't quite willing to let go. Um, and so in all, I would say that she experienced a lot of change within the first year that was like exponential, and then slowly, more and more changes over the next year after that.
What's so most people don't even get to that point. They're stuck in a system where they're just managing symptoms. From where you said it, if we just keep as a society masking symptoms with medications instead of solving some of the root cause stuff, like what do you see as the future of human health if this doesn't radically change?
Well, I mean, I would say that that's not wealth and health. That's the complete opposite. That's just illness. That's chronic disease. Um, and it's, I think, traumatic for people to be experiencing that day in and day out. Not saying that, you know, I don't believe that there are incurable diseases. I think everything can be cured in some aspect. I don't necessarily know that you'll have 100% resolution. I think part of that depends on the commitment, and part of it depends on um, your body's ability to recover. So there's going to be aspects where um, you've done so much damage to your body that it can't quite recover. So, and for instance, let's look at cirrhosis of the liver caused by either drugs, alcohol, sex, something along those lines. So, sex being that you're passing hepatitis C or B, D with it. So, you're doing pathological damage by a microbe. Um, if you have cirrhosis, that's a scarring of the liver. There's only so much that you can do to repair scars. If you break a bone, it doesn't repair to 100%. Generally, they say it repairs to 70 to 80%. So the tissues are never as strong as when they are first laid down. But that our body is so uniquely organized that we lay down tissues every 3 to 6 months, and our whole body is new a couple times a year. Like we literally have a whole new body. So if we give the body what it needs, it's going to give the healing process the priority. And when you give that, when you start focusing on um, healing and removal of toxins and removal of processes that are inflammatory to the body for not a good reason, um, then your body will start doing the instructional work that it needs to remove the obstacles to cure.
So with this is making me think ahead to like flu and cold season, which we're pretty much on the cusp of. And I'm imagining that there's a lot of people walking around with just chronic inflammation. Their body is already fighting a battle. And then you throw something on top of it. Um, what are some natural treatments that you recommend for boosting immune systems as we head into the holidays?
So, my top two favorites are going to be elderberry syrup, and you can mix that with other things like licorice, but you have to be careful because there are some conditions where licorice will be problematic. But elderberry syrup is just like a blueberry, but a smaller berry, and it has a lot of polyphenols, which have a lot of antioxidants. In flu, they found that it cuts flu down by about 4 days naturally. Um, and you recover faster if you take elderberry syrup, and it actually prevents infection, like the ability for the flu to enter your cell. So that's probably just right there is one thing that I love elderberry for. Um, and then I love our vitamin A. Vitamin A is what helps us to create what's called IgA, immunoglobulin A, which protects all our mucous membranes. If you don't have vitamin A, you can't make your IgA serum that covers all those layers. And that particular IgA is that's on the mucous membranes, eyes, ears, mouth, nose, bum, all of it, GI tract. Um, it's what helps to prevent viruses from actually locking into your cell and being taken across the membrane. Um, and so, if you have good mucilaginous vegetables that help moisten and remove things, like help keep things moving, um, that's beneficial. If you take your elderberry syrup, if you eat vitamin A rich foods, here's a little kicker. Guess what foods contain vitamin A?
I don't know what,
What season are we in right now?
fall,
Fall.
like squash.
Um, yeah, pumpkins, all those orange vegetables, that's vitamin A rich foods. Anything orange, carrots, pumpkin, squash, oranges, they're going to have a little bit of vitamin A. They don't have a lot, but they have some. And they have vitamin C, which also helps to scavenge free radicals. Um, and is an immune, like, everyone's like, oh, cold season, have vitamin C, right? So just those vegetables you can incorporate into your diet and you're already boosting. Other things would be like liver, cow liver, that has a lot of vitamin A. Organ meats, like we're so far away from organ meats in this culture that everyone's like, oh, gross, you eat an organ meat? How, that's terrible. Yuck.
And in the past, that was so common.
In the
Um,
past, it was common. You eat the whole animal.
yeah, I started making chili with like an ancestral blend. We have a place I work called Lake Meadows Naturals, and it's all like organic and stuff like that. And I was thinking, and nobody knows it, but it helps. It
Yeah.
helps. So the sense I'm getting, your innate sort of belief is that the body sort of can heal itself as long as we remove the things that are kind of clogging it up, causing it strain. Um, and a lot of that is done through food, but also obviously eliminating toxins in our environment, and setting ourselves up to kind of restore, back to kind of our optimal environment. There's a lot of people who are really into, as they get allergies or headaches, using different things like essential oils. What's your take on essential oils? Is that part of your practice? Is there not really a direct cause and effect from like the studies you see? I'm just curious what your take is on those.
So when I first was exploring um, naturopathic medicine, I was super into getting to know herbs, and I was like reading this book by Gladstar, who she has like a whole. She's a um, medical herbalist, and so I read her book and was reading some things about her, and I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to extract the compounds from all these things and make really rich oils from them, which is a didn't know it at the time, but that's called an essential oil essentially. Um, and those compounds, if you dip, and all plants have water soluble components, they all have fat soluble components, just like our body does. And so, if you take extractions of the plant of water, if you take it from essential oil, you're getting different things that are going to interact with the body. And essential oils, like if we get a cold, one of the things that you can do is like you can put eucalyptus in your bath and perfectly, clog the drain so that it kind of sits there and can get beat it off with the oil, the hot water. And if you sat there and just breathed in that eucalyptus or mint or menthol, then it starts to open up your airways. And opening up your airways allows you to get more oxygen into your blood. More oxygen into your blood means that you're doing cellular exchange. If you can get it to the periphery, which is like your fingers, toes, etc., the places away from your heart, then you're also bringing in more oxygen to remove more toxins, etc. So it's the ability of the body, oxygen, to take out the trash. I know, like, one of the things that I say to patients sometimes is like, okay, if you have a thing of garbage sitting in your kitchen and it's just sitting there, what's going to happen if you just keep walking by it? And they're like, oh, it gets disgusting, it starts smelling, and then the flies come. The same thing happens in the body. If you don't take out the trash, you're going to have a problem, right? It's going to attract all these other things, which is the same thing for the process of detoxing. So oxygen does that for our body. When we bring in oxygen, it helps us to remove things. It gives us energy. It fuels our ETC system, our mitochondria. It moves that along. It shifts from glycolysis to the electron transport chain, which is where we get the most energy from. So if you want to, like, improve yourself, breathing is the most key thing, and a little essential oil to help you do that, why not?
Love it. So I don't know how, but time is flying, and I only have literally three more questions left.
Okay.
One of them I didn't tell you I was going to ask. It just
Ooh.
came to me, but I think you'll enjoy it. Um, you obviously know your stuff. I'm sure that there are different practitioners that you love reading or following. If you could sit down and like have lunch and pick the brain of three people, living or past, whether they're in
Ooh.
the wellness space or not, and there's no wrong answer, um, who would it be? Like, who do you draw inspiration and wisdom from?
So that's such a hard question because I really follow, and I'm not saying I follow, it's like I've gained so much information from so many different people over the years that, like, their information is invaluable to me.
Okay, let's make it an
So
award show answer then. And you're gonna thank all the producers and all the coworkers, but you're probably gonna forget a couple. Who are just some that are like super top of mind for you?
So, in one aspect, so I have this enormous book. It's by Dr. Alan Gaby, and his book is called Medical Nutrition. And I've used that book since the day that I purchased it during med school to today. It has all the conditions that you'd ever want to know about to like fix. So it has like hepatitis, it has Hashimoto's, it has mental pathologies, bipolar, ADHD, it has all of these things. It's a Bible of nutrition information. And every single aspect that he has put there, like vitamin A needs to be this dose, he has like 4 or 5 pages of references for every chapter. So he's referenced, the book is referenced with uh the gold standard of our studies, which is double blinded study that nobody knows what's happening, and you're gaining the information from that. So it's these clinical trials that are not known to the people experiencing it, and they get real data on what's working, what's not, what's placebo, what's not. um every single one of those aspects that he puts in that book is has been well referenced, so I really love that. um I really appreciate some of my mentors. I have Dr. Furlong, who had taught me some cancer and some pediatric stuff. He's always somebody that I can bounce ideas off of. Um, he's been great. He taught us for our gastroenterology. He's worked for some of those bigger companies that put out stool samples and collection labs and stuff like that. Um, and then I have a lot of like the mental health aspects of it. So one of my favorites right now, and I've gotten to talk with him a few times, is Dick Schwartz, who does internal family systems. I love him. I love Frank Anderson, who also does internal family systems, and he's like doing it slightly different. Um, I would love to speak with Hahnemann, who is the father of homeopathy. I'd love to speak with Dr. Priesnitz, um, who is like hydrotherapy, um, and a little bit funny, but Kellogg, because Kellogg had a system. I mean, we don't. The Kellogg's today are not the Kellogg's of then, but he had some interesting ideas on how to restore people to health. And so the whole, like, if we could go back in time and look at the sanatoriums and kind of bring that aspect back into today's health, where people visited mountains, they visited ocean, and that was a treatment. That was a medical um, recommendation that the patient had to follow. So
Get into nature.
yeah, get into nature. Go
Oh,
see mountains. You're prescribed 2 weeks of nature, of mountain climbing. You're prescribed 2 weeks at the ocean. Like, we need that back today, I think. We are living in a world that's super stressed. And I think that reattachment to nature, that reattachment to certain aspects of like the beach and certain aspects of the mountain or the forest are very good for us. I mean, we hear of like forest bathing now, like that's a thing,
mhm.
or grounding, like barefoot grounding. Um, those are all like ways to get back into nature. But I think like if our doctors could literally prescribe us some nature time would be good, and we had to follow it instead of just take a supplement or a prescription.
I think it's funny how if I go in my backyard barefoot, lay in the ground and do breath work, I'm a weirdo, but that's sort of like how people were for most of our history. So I'd rather be the weirdo. Um, so what's one resource or tool you recommend for listeners who want to start exploring naturopathic solutions?
um so let's see, one tool or resource. Hmm. Sorry, I'm
Not
just
like
gonna
you
think
didn't
on this
just
a
give
moment.
a ton earlier.
I
And
would
we
say your intuition. That's the first one, is
Okay.
being comfortable listening to yourself. Um, in some aspects, our culture is very narcissistic. Um, and I think like we've had a lot of medical gaslighting where people not necessarily right this moment, but maybe 5, 10 years ago where people were told it's all in your head. That's not happening. Your labs are normal. And so I think that hearing, oh, well, your labs are normal, so we can't do anything for you, is like, well, does that mean you just stop looking? Because I have something wrong with me. I can feel it. And so, really relying on your intuition, I think, is the biggest tool and resource that a person can utilize. If you get a bad vibe from someone, you don't want to really hang out with them, right? You're like, I need some distance, so I'm going to stay away. But if you get a good vibe from someone, you're like, I'm going to go hang out with them. I'm going to have more conversation with them. So your intuition is the best.
That's great. And I'd imagine people are getting good vibes from you. And a lot of what you shared, they may think for themselves or for somebody that they love or know, they're struggling with this, or I've been struggling with this, and they would like to get in touch with you. Like, where can listeners or viewers of this get in touch with you or learn more about your work?
So there's my website, which I'm not. Are you gonna attach the website to it?
I will,
All
yeah.
right. So I won't say it because it's like it's lengthy because it's a Wix one. Um, so you can go to my website or you can email me. I'm always open for questions. My email is dr.cora, Cora Stover, St as in Tom, Over at protonmail.com. You can also give me a call, 203-693-1932. I practice legally, so I'm licensed in multiple states, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Um, and then, yeah, there's, and New York is one of those that's not like, I always have people, they're like, can you do anything for people in New York? And it's like, well, technically no, but yes. So for those in New York, there are ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, before we go, any final pearls of wisdom, anything that's on your heart that, as I've been talking, as you're sitting here in this moment, that you'd like to share or leave the listeners with?
Justin, I want to thank you because I think that you're doing such an amazing thing with bringing things to the forefront. I know, like, we've talked many years before when you worked for another company, and you are the reason why I joined them and the reason why that I'm still with them today. So I want to thank you for that. Um, and thank you for doing this podcast. I think that this podcast will reach a lot of people, not like this particular one necessarily, but if you keep at it, I think that you're going to reach so many people and change so many lives because you're going to bring an understanding and knowledge to people that never knew it was available.
That means a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it's been a pleasure reconnecting with you. It's been too long. I thank you so much for your time and all that you brought to this. I've had a lot of conversations. This was definitely one of my favorite. And usually afterwards, I'll share it with family and friends who I think would really benefit from it. And this is one I'm excited to share far and wide. So thank you so much. And hopefully down the road, we can reconnect and do this again.
Yes. Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Cora. I'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty.